The date is October 25th in the year 2024. My name is Anita Hecht, and I have the great pleasure and honor of interviewing Elvira Valenzuela Crocker to record some of your stories about growing up in Garden City on behalf of the Finnip Foundation and the Garden City Oral History Project. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Oh, you're welcome.
Elvira, thanks again for agreeing to contribute to this archive. Let's just begin with your date and place of birth.
Okay, I was born in Copeland, Kansas, which is about 30 miles from Garden City, and I was born August 21st, 1937.
And how old are you today then?
87.
Wow, congratulations.
Thanks.
Tell me a little bit about your family constellation.
I'm one of 13. My parents are immigrants. They came from Mexico, and like most immigrants, unlike what you've heard these days, they came to improve their lives. They're looking for a better life. My father came from Chihuahua, or as my friends say, Chihuahua, because he can't say Chihuahua. And he was 17 when he left home, and it was because of the turmoil, the political turmoil in his country that he left. And he came to the U.S. at the age of 17. My mother came with her entire family, which was 5 brothers, her mother and father, and herself, of course. And they came across in 1914, I believe. So they were both from Mexico. She came from Michoacan, La Piedad, Michoacan, in Mexico, too. So they met in Garden City, actually. You won't believe this, but at a post office.
How did they choose Garden City?
Well, my father had come and traveled east, and he went as far as, I think he may have gone all the way to New York and wasn't really happy about having to settle in New York. And so he came back to Chicago, and he found work there. And so he stayed there for a while. But he met someone from Deerfield, Kansas, which is not far from Garden City. And he encouraged him to move here because they thought it was probably a better way to make a living and a better place to live than the Chicago area. So that's why he landed in actually Garden City. And he worked for the railroad. So he was in Colorado. He was in Copeland, Kansas, and many of us were born in Copeland. I think there were about 5 or 6 of us born in Copeland, and the rest of them were born in Garden City. One was born in Colorado when he worked for the railroad company.
What do you know about his life beforehand in Mexico? Was he able to get an education?
Yes, he did.
Training?
Actually, yeah, he graduated from high school. He started college at actually a Baptist college down there, and he wanted to be a journalist, which is fascinating to me because, of course, I became a journalist. But he realized that he learned how to set type, and he learned something about, printing and stuff like that. And he wanted to be a reporter, but he never got there because that's when the turmoil started. And he figured that as a journalist, he would be probably some kind of a target. So he left. And my dad was very clever, but he walked across. He didn't come across the river. He walked across. And he actually came across on a period when he pointed to a building and said, I work over there and I forgot my papers, but I'll bring them back to you. So he came across and never went back. But actually, I think he tried that a couple of times, finally made it the second time. So he ended up going all the way east and then coming back and working in Chicago and then coming back to Kansas with this friend that he met because he thought life would be simpler here and what have you. But anyway, he was able to work for the railroad at one point. And so he lived when he was first married with my mother, they ended up in Colorado and then they came back to Copeland, Kansas. And I remember we lived in a section house when I was born. And when we got to be older, my mother said we really should move to a larger city where we will be able to educate them as well as maybe they'll have a possibility of getting employment. So that's why we moved to Garden City. And so we've been here since around probably the 1920s or so.
And what year did he cross the border? Do you know?
Yes. He crossed the border at the age of 17, and he was born in 1900. So
this was around the time of the Mexican Revolution.
Yes. So his father was a tailor, and in fact, my dad used to talk about he did clothing for Pancho Villa, which I thought was fascinating. I don't know much more about it except that he did that, and his family included like 5 boys, as I recall, but he was the only one who came across to the U.S. So
it seems like it might have been an easier crossing in his day than
I think
today.
It was, frankly, because it was a while before they became naturalized citizens.
I was
So
going
yeah,
to ask you.
yeah, it was like, I remember I was in maybe junior high when they did. And the reason they did, of course, was because my older brother thought that it would be better for them to be naturalized so they could come and go if they wanted to.
Okay.
And I remember, I don't believe that they went back to Mexico until they were naturalized.
Hmm.
So
Do you know what the process was like for them to get naturalized?
I think it was much easier than it must be now because I remember my mother studying for it and my dad both, and they both managed to pass the test, whatever it was at the time. And that was about the extent of it. And I think since they probably had roots here, it probably made it easier for them at that time. And they had children, of course.
Right.
So that was one of the reasons, of course, that we were hoping that they'd get naturalized so there wouldn't be that threat of family separation, as many people are facing now.
Right.
So,
You said he worked for the railroad here in Garden City, and
no, out of Copeland.
okay. So what did he do when he got here?
When he first got here, I think he had several jobs. I remember him saying he was a water boy on some kind of a construction outfit. So that's really all I know about that part of his life.
You mentioned to me something about being a painter for the city.
He painted for a local paint contractor for a
Okay.
while, and then he worked for the city he retired from the city. He worked in the street and sewer department for many years before he
An
retired.
underground man.
That's what he called himself, an underground man.
Uh-huh. What was he like as a person?
Bright. He was a smart man. My parents-
Ignacio Valenzuela. I just wanted to get
Yes.
his name in. Okay.
Yeah. Very bright. And this is interesting about my family, I think, is that they were really strong on all of us graduating from high school at minimum. And then if we wanted to go on, we would figure out how to do that. So we all worked and all contributed to the family. And my mother was less educated, but you know what? She was the smartest woman alive. She handled the family finances. She ran the house and, had all those children to take care of. She was a wonderful cook, and people know her better, I think, because of her cooking. And once in a while, actually on a yearly basis there for a while, Garden City had a Mexican fiesta in the month of September, and she had a food stall. And so people would frequent her stall because she made the best enchiladas in town.
Oh, I was going to ask you what kind of food she was famous
she was
for.
good. But enchiladas were one of her favorites.
So your parents met when they were young.
Absolutely. They were real young. I think they married in early 1920, I think, around that time, because she was 14 when she came here with her family. He was 17, and they met, I think, around 1920. I think it was around that time that they got married.
And for the record, what was her name?
Josefina Mesa.
Josefina Mesa.
Uh-huh. And her family was well known in this town, too.
Did they all come to Garden City? Or were the whole family was here?
Her whole family was here. Yeah.
Okay.
None of his family was ever here.
Got it. Tell me a little bit more about her family, the Mesas.
Oh, her family. I mean, one of her brothers, one of the oldest, Tony, owned 2 motels on the west side of Garden City. The Trail Inn was one of them. I don't remember the name of the other one, if they both came under that name or not. But for years, he owned motels on the west side of town. And one of the brothers was a plumber, as I recall. Or no, one of them was actually I'm trying to think what he was. Well, her brothers did varied jobs here. One of them worked for a dairy that was quite known in Garden City. And another one was a plumber, I think. I probably mentioned that before, but anyway, yeah, I can't remember all their jobs, but they did different things.
All right.
But
did she ever tell you what it was like for her to grow up here?
Well, as a girl, the only girl in the family, I think it was hard for her. I mean, I think that she was counted on by her mother to help with the brothers, and did a lot of cooking and stuff like that. But she married young, so she went from one family to another and had a lot of children she had to take care of. So
right. Was there much of a Hispanic community here when she was growing up that you know of?
It was growing, and they particularly lived on the south side of the railroad tracks. From the east side to the west side. So, but we lived just barely across the tracks on the north side. So.
Mm-hmm. Anything else about her or her side of the family you'd like to share about the influence or the culture that came down to you?
Not particularly.
Okay. Well, let's start then on your life. 1937, you enter the scene.
Yeah.
How many siblings were there before you?
Well, there would have been 9 before me.
Okay.
I was like number 10. So there were 3 after me.
Okay. And a couple didn't make it, you said.
3
3.
total didn't make it, yeah.
What did they die of?
Well, one of them died in the flu season. The others died early on in birth, so I don't recall. I wasn't here. I don't know.
Right, right. So, and you lived where in the city?
We lived on 5th Street.
Okay. In a house?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Was it a big house? Small
Not
house?
particularly, but we had lived in a section house in Copeland because
Right.
he worked for the railroad. So, yeah. No, but because our family kept decreasing as the older children got married and moved on, it was fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your earliest memory or one of your earliest memories
Of going to school or
of childhood?
anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, going to school was very interesting here because I remember when I was in the first grade, I had a teacher who tended to say things like, if there was a little Mexican girl who came to school late one day, and she was perfectly dressed, perfectly coiffed, and everything, and when she came into the classroom, she was late, and there were like 3 or 4 Mexican American children in that class, and she yelled at us and said, "You Mexican kids have to tell your parents you have to be on time." And, at that point I sat there and I thought, well, what am I, chopped liver? I'm always on time, what's going on here? But anyway, she turned out to be okay. And later in life, actually, I was doing a speech to a group of women and we talked about that. And she said, "My goodness, who did that?" And I said, "I'm sorry to say it was you." And she apologized. And I said, "It's okay. You were a new teacher, so that's fine, But I never held it against her. I just thought, this is very interesting. But I have to tell you, I think that was the beginning of my real interest in people's behavior. And I think that's what led me to be a journalist. I watched how people behaved and was trying to figure out why they behaved the way they did. I'm still doing that.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm interested in what you've learned, for
Yes,
sure.
that was interesting. And then my second grade teacher was terrific, Miss Elsie. Her father owned he owned a car shop not far from where we lived. And she treated every child like they were a gem. I mean, it just felt special around her.
Hmm.
So she was great. And it was nice to have that experience after my first grade experience. When I was in the third grade, I had another teacher whose son happened to be in my third grade class. He was a big, tall kid, kind of goofy. And she was passing out our tests that we'd taken on something. I don't remember what it was. But as she handed him his paper, she said to him, "Even the Mexican kid did better than you did." And I thought, hey, I'm the Mexican kid, but I felt sorry for him that she would embarrass him that way in front of his class. It was fascinating. And that even fed my interest in why people behave the way they do even more.
So how did you feel about being Mexican? How did this impact you?
I didn't feel bad. I knew I was Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
But, I just thought it was such how shall I put it? It was just not a very neat thing to say to your son in front of his, school
Not
mates.
at all.
I wasn't particularly embarrassed by it because at that point I thought, hey, I expect anything from people, And so, but I was fascinated by why that was important for her to do. And, that just fed my interest in people all the more and why they behave the way that they do.
These were early experiences with prejudice, too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When I was in the third grade, actually, they would pass out cards for you to sign up for swimming lessons in the summertime. And we took the cards. My brother was in the first grade at that point, and I was in the third grade. So we took the forms home. And my dad was very interested in human behavior, too. And he said to my mother, "Yeah, we should sign that for them to learn how to swim." And my mother was very hesitant. I think she knew or anticipated what was going to happen. But my father always thought, we should experience these things. We should, if it was a test, it had to be a test that we had to go through, right? So anyway, we showed up with our bathing suits and our towels, all dressed up to take
At the pool here?
at the pool, yeah, in Fit-Up Park.
Mm-hmm.
So we went to the organizing of the teachers and potential swimmers, and the woman who was calling out the names and assigning teachers didn't call our names. And so we're standing there. Now I'm in the third grade, he's in the first grade, right? And I said to her, after everybody else was assigned, "Excuse me, but you didn't call our names." And she said, "I had no intention of calling your name." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because you're Mexican." I'm in the third grade, okay? And I said, "So?" And she said, "You're not allowed to swim in the pool." I said, "Oh, okay, thank you." So I said to my brother, "Let's go. We can't go in to swim." He goes, "Why?" And I had to explain to him on the way home why this was happening. When we got home, my mother was at the door waiting for us, knowing what would happen. And so that riled up a bunch of people. I had a sister my sister Connie, was with me today. She told her boss, who was the owner of Rosa's House of Flowers, what had happened to us. And so she got really angry, and I think she played cards with some of the city fathers. So she started calling them up saying, "What are you doing? Why are you letting this happen? This is unfair. These children should learn to swim." So some of the people in the Mexican American community got upset too and started calling the city fathers and stuff like that. Well, by the end of the summer, we did learn to swim. And then other people, started using the pool. But that was part of the ugly part of my history in this community.
Mm-hmm.
But, somehow we overcame it. I think one of the reasons was, and I never took it to heart, as some people do, and it affects their behavior later on.
Or their self-worth.
Yeah, exactly. And so anyway, I think the reason that we were able to get through it without a lot of scars was that we could always go home and talk about our experiences. The dinner table was our discussion table, really. And we would talk things over that happened to us in the daytime. And my father would always give us an explanation of why that might have happened. But see, he too was a student of human behavior. And so he understood a lot of this. And I remember one of the things that he said to us early on was, a lot of what's happening to you has to do with economics. And people don't want to have to compete with anybody because they think they have certain rights to certain jobs and what have you. So you have to be better, well educated, and you have to, pursue whatever you want to pursue, but keep that in mind that, there are always people who will probably try to hold you back, but you're just going to have to work through that. So it was something that we expected in our lives. And so that helped, get through some of this stuff.
And it didn't impact your sense of self
Well, if it did initially, I got to the point where I was more interested in why people behave that way. And I realized that, maybe some of it is economic. They don't want to have to compete with you.
Right.
And so, it was just the idea that there would be people in the world like that. And that's really what they prepared us for. It's what we would encounter later on, as well as what we were doing then. And I encountered a lot of that initially.
How smart of your parents to give you a space to talk through. Oh, yeah,
we did. And I think that was helpful. And I think that's why we didn't take it to heart, and it didn't really impact our behavior.
Talk about it in terms of the friendships you made in school. Did kids mix with each other?
Pretty much. When I was in the first grade, I remember that there was an incident that occurred. And it's a good thing that we had this family forum that we could discuss things in, because this little girl, I was playing with a little girl at the sandbox, and this other little girl was headed towards us, and it was a Mexican-American little girl, and she was heading towards us, and she turned around and she said, "Run." I said, "What?" She said, "Run." And we started running, and I said to her, "Why are we running?" And she said, "That Mexican kid was coming over. She wanted to play with us." And I said, "Well, hey, I'm Mexican too." And she said, "Well, yeah, but you're different." And I said, "Let's play with her and see if she's different." And she said, "Okay." So, it was that easy, right? So she accepted that. We went back and we all played together. And I think they became better friends than we were. So I thought this is fascinating. Fascinating behavior
If
to
only
me.
it were always that easy to
Yeah.
open someone's mind.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Yeah.
How easy it was, and that the kid was open to it. That's the other thing, that discrimination and all that stuff, that's learned behavior. That is not something that I believe that you're born with. So that's why I've always been a student of sociology, psychology, and all of that.
I think you said that your father also counseled you to not try and change the adults, but
Oh, that's true. He always said to us, you know, you'll never be able to change people who are older than you are. Work with those your age. That's the group that you want to try to change and work with. And yeah, I think he was right about that, because there were older people who really had some issues. So
I think it's interesting too with the pool story that it really spurred the community to organize.
well, the Latino community, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. There was a Latin club formed. I think it was after that time or in that time frame. And so other things were tested, like the counter at the dime store, where they would do basically sit-ins, restaurants, and stuff like that. So yeah, public accommodations type of
So
thing.
there was a Latin club?
Latin American club. And my older brother was involved in that. And I think some of my sisters were too.
And they organized and did sit-ins
They do sit-ins and stuff like that, yeah, to test the water, as it were.
and eventually changed some
Yeah, it
things.
changed. I think people were really afraid in a way of encountering difference, and just the fact that, hey, it's no big deal, we're all basically alike. And I think it was easy to change because we were open to try to move it, and so we did that a lot.
Mhm.
And so yeah, it was interesting.
Did you hear any stories from your siblings about other experiences they had similar to yours?
Well, the experiences that I heard about were not being able to buy housing in certain areas of the city. And yeah, they experienced like employment discrimination sometimes.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was always an issue.
Mhm.
But things changed eventually. I think when people get to know each other, I think that makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
And they realize that we're just like they are, all we want to do is get a job, get ahead, and stuff like that. And I think that changed the community, just working at it.
Mhm. What language did you speak at home?
Both.
Both.
We had to learn English by the time we were ready to start school. So we spoke both. Probably Spanglish is really all we were speaking.
Were you able to go to friends' houses who were Caucasian? Were you
Yes.
ever
Yeah, I
experienced-
was. By the time I was in junior high school, yeah, I had friends whose houses I went to. Now, their parents may have been a little nervous initially, but they got over it,
Yeah,
once they get to know you.
exactly. Okay. Tell me about deciding to become a writer and a journalist.
Well, I think probably my fascination. Well, first of all, let me say that when I was in the third grade, I won an essay contest, and I don't even remember what the subject was now, but I won a $25 bond, and I
Wow.
thought, hey, this is a way to make money, right? And it came easy to me, and I just continued to do that. And so by the time I was in high school, I knew what I wanted to do, right? My fellow students hated me because I knew what I wanted to do, right? They were still trying to figure out what they wanted to do. But I think when you decide early, it's much easier to accomplish what you want to accomplish.
Did you tell me that you decided in third grade also?
Yes.
At the library? Tell me that.
Oh, well, I used to go the library was on my way home, and it was not where it is today. I don't remember what street it was on, but I used to stop there a lot. And the reason I stopped there was I was trying to see what was happening to Hispanics across the country. And there was never much in the way of information on that. And I looked through the card files and I couldn't find a lot of stuff either. And I decided, hey, maybe I can contribute to that. And that's basically why I became a writer.
Because you wanted to contribute,
Yeah.
make information available.
I wanted to improve the.
Yeah. What, were you a big reader?
Yes. When I went to the library, I always went home with 3 or 4 books, whatever the limit was. That's what I did.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. My father was a reader because he wanted to be a newspaper guy. So my vision of him as a child was him sitting out on the front porch in good weather, reading his newspaper after dinner. And that was just a procedure that he did every night. My mother also read the newspaper. And so, it's just seeing them read all the time too was interesting. And he read other stuff, magazines and stuff like that too. So I, was familiar with reading because they did it.
Right. They
So,
modeled it.
yeah.
Where do people get their news? I always think it's interesting to compare it to today's
Oh, well,
world.
newspapers,
Mm-hmm.
which, I wanted to do. And that's what he had done. But I didn't know until much later in my life that he wanted to be a
Right.
journalist and a writer. And it was interesting because when I was growing up, he would write letters to the editor and he would give them to me to read, to proofread, as well as to check his grammar. And I thought that was interesting,
He was preparing you,
Yeah.
and maybe unknowingly.
Yeah,
Right.
unknowingly is true.
So what kind of a kid were you?
That's a good question. I guess I was a pretty outdoor kind of person. I like to ride my bike. I got a bike because I ran my mother's errands, so I got a bike because of that. And I played softball as a teenager with a sort of a pickup group of women who played. And I was, I suppose, one of the younger people playing on that team, but I was a pitcher. And so then eventually that grew into a real organized team. And we ended up playing teams from around the area, Scott City, Meade, Lakin, places like that. And so it was a women's team that played. And I once pitched a no-hitter. I was a pitcher. I once pitched a no-hitter. I think it's because of my height and I can hit the strike level fairly easily.
Wow.
So
Was sports kind of an integrating
yeah,
factor?
of course, yeah.
Yeah.
And like my brothers played baseball, softball. And it was interesting because I got into it because they would come over before their games and I would warm them up. So
Oh. Uh-huh.
that was always fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else did you do when you got to high school? Well, first of all, there was an important sixth grade teacher you had, I think. You said Mr.
Oh, yeah.
Williams.
Mr. Williams. He was wonderful. He later became an assistant principal at the high school, but he was very good. He was very challenging. We'd have spelling bees, and if I missed a word or something, he'd say, well, what happened there? And I thought I just didn't know that word or whatever. But anyway, he was very good at, egging me on to do better than what I was doing. And I was a pretty good student, so yeah. And then he later became the assistant principal. And it was really cool because when I was in high school and he was the assistant principal, he was the one who called me into his office, as well as Florence Lyle, my classmate, and we were the two selected to go to Girls State.
Tell me about that.
Well, Girls State was something that was done by the American Legion, and they had a boys' state and they had a girls' state. And so you gathered, well, we went to KU at that point. And it was like you would try to form a government. You would run for offices and stuff like that. So it was a government kind of thing.
To learn about civic engagement and government.
Right. So it was fun.
Do you remember what office you ran for?
I think I ran for either it was a state office, I think. Maybe somebody ran for governor, and I ran to be a legislator of some sort.
Uh-huh. Did you have a political leaning or affiliation at that time in your life? Or
Yes.
Did your family?
Yeah. We were all what I would call liberal, but not crazy liberal, as some people would think, but we were certainly on the liberal side.
And was that unusual for Garden City?
Oh, yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
I think it's unusual for Kansas.
For Kansas.
Yeah. But I mean, I
today.
think, and when I lived in Wichita, and that county was fairly liberal when I moved there, but it isn't now.
Mm-hmm. Debate?
Oh, yeah, I lettered in debate, which I think was fantastic because it really prepared me for public speaking that I did later in life and stuff like that. It's really a wonderful thing to do. It helps you organize your thoughts and how to present them and stuff like that. I loved it. And I was one of just 2 to 4 girls who were involved in it in high school, but I lettered in, and that was fantastic. Great experience.
Do you remember anything you debated?
No, not at this point. I don't remember. I just don't remember what the subjects were at that point.
So you were in high school from 52 to 56, is that correct?
Well, if you count junior high, counting junior high in that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Those were interesting times in the country. Was there anything going on that
Uh,
filtered down to you?
I'm sure there was, but I cannot think of anything right now that
Okay.
was critical.
So softball, debate. What'd you do for fun as a teenager? Did you go to movies or?
Oh, yeah, movies. We went to movies. That's another interesting experience because when we went to the movies when I was growing up, and generally my father loved movies, so he would go with us. But if we went to the movies, we had to sit up in the balcony.
Was this at the State
State
Theater?
and the Ritz, which was down south on me. And that was kind of interesting because if my friends wanted me to go to the movies with them, they would sneak me in to the first floor. And if there was an usher coming by, they'd make me duck. And so, but I mean, everybody understood what the protocol was, you know. All the minorities sat upstairs. And there were a few black families in the city at that time. So everybody sat upstairs, and everybody else who was Anglo sat downstairs.
And that didn't change before you left?
Before I left, I think it did change, but I don't recall that for sure. But it changed eventually. Yeah.
Did you work at all when you were a
Oh
teenager?
yeah, I worked first of all, I babysat for a while, and actually I babysat for a family who he was like a car dealer, and so I got my first car from him. I bought it from him, and it was okay. It was kind of a Nancy Drew kind of car.
Uh-huh.
It was a little coupe, Dodge coupe, and it was a two-seater, of course. And I love that car. It was like, you know, I drive to school and I pick up the junior college guys, and they'd sit in the back seat, and I just give them a ride if I was going straight up to school because the school was up on Kansas Avenue or in that area, and so it was quite far from where I lived. So that's why I got that car. But that was a great car. And then I also worked at a grocery store. There were two of them. The Stoner brothers, Homer and Harold, had grocery stores. They were small grocery stores. One was at 5 Points, and the other one was down on, I want to say 8th. No, it wasn't on 8th. I'm sorry. I think it was on Fulton and 8th, maybe. And that's the one I worked at. It was a small grocery store. And I had a lot of fun working at that grocery store. You know, I learned how to weigh stuff and, you know, run the cash register, stock the shelves and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun.
You met a lot of the
I
residents.
met a lot of people, yeah, that way. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of customers who knew me, who came in there.
It was a pretty small town that you grew up in.
Absolutely. I don't think there were more than 10,000 people at that time. I think it's grown quite a bit since then.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it was a small town when I grew up in it.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe the physical environment and how it compares to what you see when you come back today?
Oh, my God, yes. For one thing, the minority population is incredibly large compared to when I grew up here. And, I mean, it only got inflated as farm workers came here when there was a sugar beet factory here, you know. And I think that flow has continued as agriculture crops needed people. And so every summer, the population of Hispanics would go up because these people would come into work. And a lot of them came into the grocery store where I worked. So that's how I knew about that. But yeah, I mean, it's the population has grown. It has grown in diversity. Today we talk about those tropes about the Haitian families who come into Ohio and how they're eating the dogs and they're eating the cats. I have to tell you, that isn't new. I remember a time when there was a group of people who came here, and I remember the rumors about my sister had a Cocker Spaniel that disappeared. And the rumors were that these people were eating the dogs. And I thought, boy, the tropes that are being used, they're not new. They're old. And you want to say, wake up, America. This has happened to us again.
Right. Some people are stuck back in.
Yes. It really is interesting. But yeah, I remember that part.
Wow.
But, physically, I mean, I think that when I grew up here, it was like you did certain things. You went to church, you played softball, people came to the games, or you played basketball or football or whatever. It was kind of a, small town kind of way of growing up.
Mm-hmm. Did you go to church?
Yeah,
What
we went to
church?
St. Mary's.
Uh-huh.
That's where my parents actually got married,
I
at St.
see.
Mary's when they got married. And so, yeah, I went to St. Mary's. And actually, I went to Catholic school for 2 years. And my father thought that, we were old enough to take care of ourselves so that if we went to St. Mary's, we could take care of ourselves, basically.
What years did you go to Catholic school then?
It was the 7th and 8th grade.
I see.
Yeah.
Was
And
your family very religious?
how shall I put this? We were, I think, probably cautiously religious. And by that, I mean, we never went overboard. And, we knew families who were, they were on their knees half the time, and yet their behavior was bizarre. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes it wasn't what you would expect of someone who spent all that time being religious. So my father was very cautious about that. He once said to us, large families are expected to give up one or two of their children to religious life, like to be priests and nuns. Don't bother. He said, don't even think about it. None of you will ever qualify for that. So we did. It was like something that we didn't have to do, But it was really funny.
Uh-huh. And was the church mixed? Was it both Hispanic and
Yes,
white?
it was at that time.
It was at that time.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to also ask you, because I've heard about the Valenzuela family from several people, what's going on with your siblings? How did they progress in their lives?
Oh, my older brother worked for the Postal Service for
And his
years.
name was?
Alfred. And so he worked for the Postal Service. And my next brother, Rudy, was a master photographer. People in this area know him very well. If you got married, you graduated, he was the one who took your picture.
How did he choose that as a profession?
Well, he was in the Army, and I think he may have done some of that. But he was in a plane crash in North Carolina, and there were two of them in the plane. The partner died in that crash, and he was out in a field, for a day or so before they found him. But he was a photographer and super photographer. And my sisters, one of them worked for a dentist.
Let me stay with him for just a minute. Did you tell me that he photographed the Clutter murders?
Oh, yeah. When the Clutter murders occurred in Garden City and Hokum, he was called in by the police to photograph the crime scene. And he did. And his wife was the court stenographer for that case. And of course, both of them realized stuff that other people didn't know about. And they had nightmares for several months.
You were already gone from here?
Yes, I was gone. I was in school.
What a horrible story that was.
Yeah, but he did the shooting of that crime scene. And he also photographed, I came out here to do a story. I was working at the Wichita Eagle at the time, and my husband-to-be was the editor of the Sunday section. So when that happened, I tried to get an interview with Truman Capote, who wrote the book In Cold Blood. And I missed him for 4 or 5 years. And then finally, when he finished the book, I was able to catch up with him. And I interviewed him in my brother's studio, and he took the pictures for that story. But it was a fascinating event, and he actually liked the story. And I thought that was really, he told my brother that, and he said, if she'd like to get a job in the Times-Picayune in Louisiana, he said, I'd be glad to put in a good word for him because he liked what I'd done. And I said, no, thanks. I'm not a Southern girl.
No, thank you. Oh, interesting. I think you also said your brother worked with Richard Avedon, or there was a story there.
Oh, yeah, there was a funny story that happened. And Richard Avedon, who is quite well known as a photographer, came out with Truman Capote one time, and he shot a bunch of pictures, and he took the film roll that she shot into my brother, and he said, could you develop these for me? And he said, sure. So he took it back, and he came back, and he said, I think I'd give you one bit of advice. Take the cap off of your camera when you start shooting. And I thought, oh my God, the country bumpkin told the well-known photographer that maybe he should take the cap off the. So yeah,
There
that
was
was fun.
nothing on the roll.
I thought that was hilarious.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
And so, okay, after Rudy came.
Oh, okay. After Rudy, it was. I'm sorry, I skipped Esther. Esther was between the two of them,
Okay.
and Esther was a farm wife, and she was a great mother to her kids. I mean, she was so organized. She would have them sit down after lunch, and they had to be reading a book. So they had organized reading and everything. She was really good. She was a good farm wife. She was married to a farmer, and as a matter of fact, her husband leased land from the Finnip
Oh,
family. And so all the time that he farmed, I think he farmed Finnip land.
was he also Hispanic?
Yes.
Her husband?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so there was some
Yeah.
Hispanic farmers
Yeah.
that owned their own land and farmed
Well, he
around.
didn't own his own land, but
He leased it.
he
Sorry.
leased it, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. And he did that all his life, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And he had been in the military, and that's, I think, how they met. But
Okay. Esther.
I think he was from the Lakin area.
Okay.
And then Rudy. And then it would have been, well, Dora was in that group, the older group. And she married somebody there was an air base here at one point, which I didn't realize until later in life. And that's how she met her husband. And they lived in San Antonio. So she left very young, very young. So I didn't really know her all that well. And then there was, after Dora, I think, Connie, who is with me now. She actually became a nurse. She was the first girl to really leave home for education. So she went to Wichita to the St. Francis Hospital School of Nursing. She got her nursing degree, and then later in life she got her BS in nursing from Wichita State. But she was the first girl who really left home for college or whatever. Mm-hmm. And she also went to China on a people-to-people tour, and it was on nursing. And so when she went, she was amazed at how far behind the Chinese were on their techniques and what have you. So they went and they explained some of the things that they did and the treatment of patients and what have you. Mm-hmm. But she was chosen as one of the groups of nurses that went to China on that people to people. And then she even ran for the legislature when she lived in Wichita.
So she got political too?
Yeah. We all were to a certain extent.
She ran for the state legislature. Did
Yes.
she get a seat?
No, she didn't win. Is that what you asked me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, she didn't win.
Okay. All
but
right.
she was very active in the party.
What were some of the issues that you
At that time, I don't remember.
Okay.
I was gone.
Yeah.
So I don't remember what that was about.
She's younger than you?
No, she's older than I am.
She's older.
Yeah.
And
then Josephine was after her. And Josephine was married to a painter. She was a bookkeeper at Fansler's Auto Service or whatever it was in Garden City at the time. And she worked for quite a few years before she got married. And her husband was a painter. And he was from Copeland. And he knew our family. He loved my mother and always wanted to marry one of her daughters, I think. Mm-hmm. And so he did eventually. But anyway, yeah, so they were married for a long time. And then she died before he did, and then he died. But they've got a set of twins and a son who was a police officer in Wichita. And I think he does private stuff now.
Okay.
And then she had a daughter, too, who worked at one of the banks here.
Okay. And then who came next?
Oh, okay.
Thank you. I'm taxing your memory.
Hope was the next one. And she was a dental assistant to a Dr. Stone, who was on Main Street, not far from here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
then she married Hector Garcia, who's from Garden City. And he wanted to be a dentist. So they moved to Houston so he could get his dental degree. And then I think he changed degrees at some point. But he did work for the city of Houston and the Diocese of Houston. And she put him through school. Then 2 children, a son and a daughter, they graduated from college. And then we told her she had to go back to school. So she did. She got her degree there, too. So they were all college graduates. So.
And then you had a younger sister.
Anna Maria, yeah. And she went to Wichita State. And then she ended up at Stanford and got her master's at Stanford.
Wow. In what?
I think it was Spanish literature.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong on that.
So, am I correct in assuming that the next generation all go to college now?
Yeah, oh my God, I can't count them. Every family has had somebody who has gone on to college, which is interesting, because um, y- I think that we just sort of grew people who saw their other relatives going to college and thought, okay, that's what I should do.
Right, right,
And so, yeah, every family has had uh, somebody, like two or three or four,
right.
who went to college.
Hard workers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to you. So, what happened to you? You were in high school.
Yeah,
You were.
I graduated in 56 and
Mm-hmm.
went on to junior college and graduated in 58. And then I stayed out a year and thought, you know, I really wanted to be a writer, but I thought, okay, I'll try maybe teaching. So I went to Emporia State for a semester. I knew it wasn't for me. So I transferred to Wichita State where I could get a degree in journalism. And I got my degree at Wichita State University. And after that, I worked actually, I'd worked on the newspaper here as a student. I did a teen column for them for a year. And then I also substituted for what was then the society editor for the summer because she took a vacation. So I substituted for her. And then they didn't have any jobs for me. So I knew I had to go on to school. So I went to Wichita State, and that's where I got my degree. And while I was there, I worked at the public relations office, which was great because I just kept writing. And the fun part was that my boss would sometimes call my department head and say, "We need her to come work this afternoon because we got the special thing going." So I could get out of class sometimes. So to do the special whatever, but
Do you remember what tuition was at Wichita State?
about $1,000
A year?
a semester.
A semester. How did
And-
you finance that?
Well, I worked summers, but then my mother always saved up money for me too. So I always had enough money to go. But if you can imagine, I mean, that's kind of hard to do.
Yeah.
So, but we managed it. And my father always said, if there's something that you want to do badly enough, we'll see how we can work it out.
I'm thinking of this time in your life in Garden City, and how do you think it prepared you for the world? How do you think it's influenced the path that you took? As you,
Oh, well, I think that, we were well grounded family wise. And we always knew that we could count on each other. We always helped each other as kids and growing up. And I remember when I was at Emporia or wherever I was a student. And if anybody in my family came to visit, I always got a few extra bucks that they gave me. And that was kind of cool because they were just supporting me however they could. And we always supported each other. And we encouraged each other to do, good things. And it was just, we were a family who supported each other. And my brothers were very supportive of me. So.
I think there was one other story about a golf course that you told.
Oh, yeah, there was people who wanted to play golf in this town when I lived here. There was only one place you could do that, and that was at the country club. Well, if you weren't a member, you really couldn't play anywhere. So my brother was with the JCs, the Garden City JCs at that time, and they decided to build a golf course on the east side of town. I'm not even sure if it's still there or not. I just don't know. But anyway, he physically helped build that golf course. And of course, probably took away a lot of his time from his family, but that was something that he loved doing. And so
Which brother was this?
This was L,
Okay.
the oldest.
Interesting. I wonder if Hispanics were allowed to be members of the country club.
Hispanics?
Yeah.
Not to my knowledge at that time.
So we're not going to have enough time to do all of your career, but maybe you could tell me some of the highlights because you really had quite a amazing path.
I worked in Dodge City, my first full-time job.
This was after you got your BA in
Yes, after I got my degree.
'61.
Yeah. And so this is interesting too, because when I went to Dodge City for my interview, the editor, whose name I'm sorry I don't remember at this point, was a sweet old man. And he said to me, it was probably a year or two out of retirement, from retirement. But anyway, he said to me, he said, I'd like for you to join our newspaper during the interview. And I said, that's fine, but I'm going to have to find a place to live. Do you have any suggestions? And he said, yes. He said, right over here near the newspaper, there is a woman who's a friend of mine who has some apartments back here. And he said, and it's a nice place. I'll call her and tell her you're coming over to see if she's got. So he called her and she had one available. So I went over there and she said, she was very nice. She showed it to me and everything. I drove 50 miles back to Garden City and I got a call from her and she said, I'm sorry. She said, I can't rent to you. And I said, why? And she said, well, my other renters would not like it. I said, excuse me, did you own that building? And she said, yes. I said, and you actually rent the place? And she said, yeah. I said, well, why are your other renters telling you can't rent to me? And she said, well, it's because you're Mexican, and I don't think that they would like that. I said, I see. Put the phone down, called the editor, and I said, look, I'm not sure if I can come work for you. And he said, well, why? I said, well, because the woman you sent me to. She showed me this place, and she said she couldn't rent to me because I was Mexican. And he damn near cried on the phone. And he said, I am so sorry. He said, I just did not realize that that would happen to you. And I said, well, unless I can find a place to live, I'm not sure I can come work for you. Well, he said, can you come back tomorrow? And I said, well, I guess so. I drove back the next day. And he had called another friend of his, a little cowboy guy who came in and, boots and all. And he said, he's got a place for you to look at and see, or other places to look at to see if you want to rent them. So I said, okay. So this guy, he took me up 2 blocks in his Cadillac to look at this apartment. And I said, yeah, this will do. And he said, if you don't like the furniture, just, go to this other store and go to the store and just get whatever you want and have them deliver it. I said, okay. So I took the place and that's where I lived while I was there. But I wasn't there for quite a year. But it was an interesting experience because some of the staff was really interesting. There was a guy who was a sports editor who, if something went wrong or he couldn't come up with the right word or phrase, he'd pick up the typewriter and throw it on the floor. And the first time it happened, I jumped out of my chair and the guy sitting next to me said, pretend it didn't happen. He said, this happens quite a lot. I said, oh my God, why? He says, well, he gets frustrated when he can't write. I said, oh my God, how many typewriters has the guy been through? So anyway, that was kind of the joke, how many typewriters? But anyway, so I got quite a little bit of experience there doing all kinds of stories.
I was going to ask you, were there particular areas of interest you like to write about or certain kinds of assignments?
I didn't mind anything really, but I like to talk to people.
Okay.
And do, human
interest
kinds of stories, yeah.
Did you write about prejudice or discrimination ever, or some of your experiences?
Well, I think that generally, well, I did, but it wasn't at that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And so then I spent like about 8 months there. Then I moved to the Wichita Eagle and Beacon at the time.
What was it called?
The Wichita Eagle and Beacon.
Okay.
It was like a combined. There were 2 newspapers in town. Then eventually, one became the same. The 2 merged. And so I worked at the Eagle. And when I first went there, actually I worked for the Beacon side of it. And it was the afternoon paper. And so what I did was education. I was an education writer for a while. And at one point, my editor came up to me and he said, the New York Newspaper Women's Club is giving a fellowship to Peru. And he said, and I didn't really hear a lot about this. I mean, he just sort of mentioned to me in passing. Well, months later, I learned that I won the U.S. part of that fellowship, and it was a travel and study fellowship to Peru. So early on in my career, I went to Peru for a travel and study fellowship, and it was an exchange fellowship. So the woman from La Prensa in Lima came to my job, and which
For
was
how long?
it was like a 4 month, 3 or 4 month travel and study fellowship. So she lived with the family here, and then I lived with her family in Callao, outside of Lima.
Wow.
So
How was that for you?
it was great. I mean,
Yeah.
living in a different country was fascinating, and of course, the country itself was very fascinating. I went to Machu Picchu, for instance, Iquitos, some places like that. Yeah, this is really funny. This is a funny story. I went to Iquitos, which is the jungle area of Peru, and I was into jazz. I didn't know anything about Mexican music, okay? And so when I got to Iquitos, to the hotel, I said to the guy at the desk, I'd like to take a tour on the Amazon. And the guy said, okay, I'll arrange it for you. He says, but I'll call you when we get it set up. I said, fine. So when I checked into the hotel, this was really funny. This guy and the reason they couldn't check me in right away was because they were waiting for this massive party of people for two Mexican singers, and they were there to entertain, right? Well, the Mexican singer and his wife arrived. They had a child with them who was about 5, and their names were Tony Aguilar and Flor Silvestre. And if you know anything about Mexican music, they were hot at the time, okay? Well, we didn't have the internet. I didn't know who they were, right? So when he signed in, I leaned over to see who had signed in. And from that moment on, they thought I was with his party. So everywhere he went, if I was there, their son, 5 years old, would run over and talk to me, right? Well, that meant they came over, the crowd came over, and this happened for about 3 or 4 days. And it got to the point where people would come up to me and say, "Do you think I could get a picture of the cantantes?" And I'd say, "Talk to my assistant over here," and it was their press secretary. And so it was a funny thing. So then when I left Callao, unfortunately, I was going back to Lima, and they got on the same flight with the son, okay? The son sees, and I'd leave for the airport before I knew they were going to leave because I thought, I don't want to deal with all this crowd, right? Because it was like they would just, masses would move over to them. So I got to the airport and I was there, oh, God, I'm safe, right? The little boy walks in, runs right over to me, which means the mother followed him. The father eventually followed him, and there's the crowd again. And I thought, this isn't going to happen for me. I'm never going to get away from this. So, of course, they were going to Lima. We landed in Callao, which is outside of Lima. And, of course, my Peruvian family picked me up, and I said, let's get out of here fast because I don't want to get involved in this crowd again. So they said, great. Well, we got out to the car. Guess where their car was? Directly across from where we were.
They were giving you a taste
And
of
I thought, okay,
stardom.
Yeah, but it was funny. I mean, I didn't know who he was. I mean, we didn't have the internet. I wasn't into jazz. I didn't know Mexican music. So later on, he ended up at the state fair here in Kansas.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, what do you think was particularly Mexican in your family? The food, like the culture, not the music so much when you were growing
Well, my
up
father, he played Mexican music.
He did?
Yeah, he had a guitar and he sang and played, but it was never one of my interests, and it wasn't like it happened every day.
Do you have memories of the Mexican fiesta in town?
Of course, yeah, because my mother had a booth.
Oh, that's right.
So, yeah, we knew that. And my father was generally, well, when I was here, he would be the MC. So,
did you ever perform or do anything in the fiesta?
No, I wasn't a performer of that kind.
Uh-huh.
No.
Okay.
But my sister was a queen. They would have a king. They would have a queen, and she was a queen, Hope.
Oh, okay.
Hope was a fiesta queen at one point.
So that was an experience, I imagine, of some pride in your culture.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was not anything that you ever were ashamed of,
Mm-hmm.
It was something that you just, I probably took it for granted.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, any other highlights you want to share about your professional career, your path, things that you
Let me see.
are proud of?
Well, several nice things have happened to me over that. Yeah, when I moved to Washington, D.C. with my husband, it's that area, in 1972 at Watergate time. And he was a news editor at the Washington Post for years. And
you met him here in Kansas?
yeah, we met at the Wichita Eagle. And
Okay.
yeah. So actually, we had started working for the same chain. I started with the Garden City Telegram, which was a part of the chain that his newspaper in Salina was. So we sort of worked for the same chain, in different cities, and then we met here. But anyway, when we moved there, I couldn't work at the Post because they have an what do you call that? An anti,
You can't have a married couple
yeah,
working.
allegedly. But anyway, because there was some. Anyway, so I had to find a different kind of job, right? So I initially worked for the National Council of La Raza, which is now the biggest Hispanic organization called Unidos. And so I did a magazine for them and a monthly newsletter and did their PR, basically. And then I also worked at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Office of the Civil Rights Commission as a writer. And then from that point, there were preparations for the Women's National Conference in Houston, and I was loaned from my agency to that group and did writing for them up until the convention. And I was on the commission for women in Montgomery County in Maryland, and from that point, I was nominated to be a candidate to go to the Women's Houston Conference. And that was in 1977? I don't know, I have to look that up.
And
But
it was the conference on
women.
women.
Yeah.
It's like national.
It was a first national women's conference.
Mhm.
Right. Bella Ebsa was in charge of it. And so, interestingly, one of the people who spoke or was involved in that was Liz Carpenter, for whom I later worked.
And who was she, for the record?
Liz Carpenter was she was an assistant in communications for Senator Johnson, and then went to the White House as an aide to Mrs. Johnson.
Okay.
Do you remember Mrs. Johnson had that? She had that campaign where they did flowers. They planted flowers. Ladybird, yeah. Where they planted flowers. And by the way, I met her. And I met her daughter. Her daughter was involved in the women's conference. So that's how I met Linda. But anyway, I ended up working for Liz. And Liz was the most fun I ever had in a job because she had a great sense of humor. And she was so funny. And I can tell you this story, but you probably can't use it, about her after she left. She had, I used to write funny lines for her. And wherever I worked, I would get a call from her if she needed a funny line sometimes.
Oh, so you also have a humorous.
Oh, yeah. I had a humorous relationship with her. But anyway, she, after she left, and I know you probably can't use this, but after she left, she lost one of her breast to cancer. And so I was probably the only person who could write her and say, well, people have called you a boob all your life, and now you really are officially a boob. Okay, but that isn't the funny part. The funny part is that later in Houston, she was speaking to a men's group, and my brother-in-law was in the crowd. She actually read that letter to that group. And so he went up to her and he said, that's my sister-in-law you're talking about. And she said, you're kidding. And that was really kind of funny. But we had a good relationship, and that was the most fun job I ever had.
Oh, wonderful. And then you spent a lot of your career writing in D.C.?
Yes. I actually go in more ways than one because my professional life was writing. I also worked for the education department when it was under the old HEW structure. Okay. And then when Jimmy Carter came in, they created the department, took it out of that. So, yeah, I worked as a speechwriter at that point. And then when they passed the law for the creation of the department, I was assigned to take the press calls. And I worked in the what do they call it? The building adjacent to the White House, the old executive office building. And then once it was created, then I moved over to the new executive office building as they shaped the
department.
So I did that. And then after that, I worked for 17 years for the National Education Association. Now, the funny thing about all that is that, I've been in education all this time. And at one point, somebody had said to me, my counselor in junior college said to me, you should be an educator. And I said, why? And he said, because you're good at math. I said, yeah, but I don't want to do that. He says, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to be a writer. He said, well, that's going to be real hard to do, isn't it? It's going to be hard to make a living. I said, not the way I'm going to do it. I mean, it's like the imagination of how you write, how you make money writing. It was something that clearly he hadn't really thought of. But I thought this is very interesting. So anyway, I went on to be a writer. But that, I mean, I had so much fun. And in a way, I was glad that I wasn't a newspaper person because I got to do all these things. And I ended up working for educators. That's what the funny part is to me, that, he said I should teach. And I ended up working for teachers. But that was a really fun job because I saw how hard teachers work, how little they get paid for it. And I always wondered, why don't people realize that there are very few jobs in which people deal with 20 or 26 or 25 kids in a classroom? I said, I can't think of any job that's equal to that. And I thought, and yet they don't pay them very much in some parts of the country, certainly not in the South.
Right.
So anyway, so I enjoyed that part of it because I would train them on how to do press interviews and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wrote a lot of stuff, fact sheets and stuff like that for them. But I loved that. Yeah.
So as you look back on your whole career, are you still working right now, or did you retire
well,
from
I
writing?
should say no. What I do is I volunteer. There is a monthly publication, a newspaper that is done out of Wichita, and it's done for a 3-county area, and I proof and edit for them.
Okay. So at some point you came back to Kansas.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. We came back to Kansas in 2000. And
What motivated that move?
my husband, he wanted to come back here. Frankly, it would have been far too expensive to live back there on retirement, And so we moved back here. And
Did you ever consider Garden City? You wanted a bigger place.
No, I mean, you outgrow places, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so no, we didn't consider that at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
But we had a lot of friends in Wichita still.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a lot of people we knew. And so it was just, better
Smart.
for us. Yeah. Yeah. All of our good friends were here. So.
Okay. And anything about your life since 2000 that you want to include here?
Well, let's see. And last year I had a really nice thing that happened to me. Wichita State University decided they would honor me and welcome me into their what do they call it? The I'm sorry.
Liberal Arts and Sciences Hall of Fame.
Thank you. God, this is unbelievable. But anyway, yeah, they did. And that was really that was a nice event, totally unexpected. And actually, when the head of that department, school, called me, I said 3 questions. 1, how did you find me? Oh, number 1, thank you. But 2, how did you find me? And I know I had another question to ask him. So he wrote back and said that they'd done a national search. And I thought, okay, that's very nice. But anyway, it was a very nice event and totally unexpected. So that was nice.
That's wonderful. Did you also come back here for high school reunions?
No, but I was honored by my high school. I have that in my notes. I don't remember what year it was, but yeah, I came back to speak at graduation, and actually I was honored in their Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So does Garden City figure into your world at all anymore, or people
only that I have relatives here?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts you'd like to share about the issues that still face Garden City, the country, and some of the topics you've discussed on race, on immigration, on prejudice?
I think that this part of the state is fascinating in the sense that when I lived here, it was not a predominantly dominated part of the country with Hispanics. And now I think that's changed. Many cities, whether it's Dodge City, Garden City, Ulysses, or whatever, there is a heavy Hispanic presence now that wasn't here at all when I was here. Mm-hmm. So that's a real change that I've noticed. Mm-hmm. And I think probably things have changed quite a bit since I was here. I don't see the issues that people faced before or when I was here.
Mm-hmm.
So, but times change. So do people. So do towns.
Do you have any advice for the younger generation of Hispanics in terms
Stay
of
in school.
stay in school?
Stay in school. Graduate.
Mm-hmm.
Go on to higher education. Absolutely. We were real believers in that. My parents were very strong believers in education because they knew it was the path to success,
Right.
whatever that
Well,
was.
and you're the perfect example of that
Well, I
coming
hope.
true, right?
I hope.
What about the thoughts on the state of journalism and news today?
Well, it's very sad because so many newspapers have disappeared, and it's hard to compete with some of the electronic media that we have now. And I think that's the saddest part is that there aren't newspapers. And the other thing is where people get their news today. It's very sad to me that they get it from what I would call unreliable sources. And that's tragic because it feeds your political system and how that plays out. And it's really sad because some of the outlets now are not that reliable or that fact related.
Mm-hmm.
And so people operate on information that isn't even fair or even true. And that's what really upsets me, that there are people who believe things that they read that aren't true because they're not dealing with reliable sources.
They're eating the dogs.
And that's a good example. They're
Right.
eating, thank you for letting me say they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. That's been on my mind, That is the craziest thing. It's just an old trope that's been around for years.
Yeah.
It's the second time I've heard it in my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's all aimed at the same thing, moving us toward a fascist society,
Yeah,
which is frightening.
it is frightening. Anything else that you'd like to share about your hopes for the future?
Well, my hopes are that our next election gives us a president that is still on the side of, free, a free world, a free society. That's my biggest hope. And I hope that people realize that when you come down to it, we're not all that different. We may have different faces. We may have, different features and what have you. But when it comes down to it, we're all human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's, as I say, though, I've always been fascinated by human behavior and what promotes that kind of behavior. And I guess I'm still working at that, trying to figure it out.
Yeah, have you learned any lessons you'd like to share here?
I don't know that I have really. I mean, other than, people can be really fair-minded. I had some people who have been very helpful to me throughout my life. And they're decent people, and it doesn't matter what color your skin is or anything. They recognize things like your abilities and what you're capable of and what the potential is. And those are the kind of people I'm attracted to.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've just enjoyed interviewing you very much.
Well, good.
Is there anything I haven't asked you about Garden City or your early years here that you'd still like to share?
Yeah, well, what's interesting to me is the way the Garden City pool apparently has been reconstructed.
That's true.
And I haven't seen it, maybe I'll drive by there before we leave, but that was sad to me because it really has, I had so much fun there. And I guess it was my first realization of how people could behave fairly and unfairly,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I miss that part of it. And basically, it's a good town to grow up in.
Mm-hmm. I guess the one remaining question I had was about the activism that you experienced. Did that give you a sense that systems can be changed?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. I mean, whether it was women's rights or whatever, yeah, I think people can change. I think they just have to be exposed to other people and different kinds of people. And once they're exposed, I think whatever fear or caution they may have had about that, I think that goes away. I mean, I've known people that, probably were very reticent to deal with me, but once they came to know me, they became good friends.
Right.
And I think people just need exposure to each other. We don't all eat cats and dogs.
Right. Um, immigration and the border are huge topics right now, and I
Yes.
know there's a huge immigrant community here. Do you have thoughts about how that issue should be solved or hope
Well,
that it's solved?
certainly, certainly they have to get a handle on it. But I think what's fascinating is that people may think it's just an Hispanic issue. And if you look at what was happening on the border in Texas, there were people coming from Ukraine, which probably would shock people if they didn't know that, Ukraine, they were coming from all different parts of the world. They weren't just coming from Mexico or Latin America. They were coming from all over the world. And yeah, I think it just takes a lot of common sense and a lot of the hysteria that people generate over it. I mean, people are people. And this is the thing that really gets me. People don't come here to get on welfare, as they say. I mean, people come here for the same reason, I swear, that they are looking for a better life. I mean, just like the other people who were here before us, right? We all came for the same reason, for a better life. And once people get that through their heads, maybe they'll think of a meaningful way to allow other immigrants to come. It's sad because there are a lot of people, a lot of families, a lot of Hispanic families that, may have parents who are not citizens yet, but their children were born here.
Mm-hmm.
And this nonsense about jailing them or trying to, get them out of the country in some way or another. I mean, don't they remember history? I mean, that's the killer. I mean, look at the Japanese they had internment camps for them. How did that work out? We just don't seem to learn from our history.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the fascinating thing to me.
Well, and it's important, therefore, to tell these stories so that people can learn from
absolutely.
personal experience.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Thank you so much for letting me interview you.
Oh, no problem.
It was great.
Good.
And
Well, good. It was nice talking to you.